This video is going to walk you guys through the steps to going from the photograph of your three-dimensional model of your word to drawing it out similar to this. And this is your preliminary sketch to give you practice in rendering the letters and drawing them out as accurately as possible. This is a 4x6 photograph. You're going to have a 4x6 box in your sketchbook, and then the goal is to draw your letters, again, as accurately as possible, and they should be close to the same size or same scale. So starting out, I think one of the most helpful things is to make a grid for yourself. And the most basic of grids would be to divide both your height, which is 4, and your width, which is 6, divided in half. So you're going to measure out 3 inches here at the bottom, measure out 3 inches over to the right at the top, and connect. And the same thing here. I measured down 2 inches and made a dot, measure down 2 inches, make a dot, and connect. Do the same exact thing to the 4x6 box in your sketchbook. And then if you wish to make even more grid lines, maybe you have a little tricky spot, like looking right here, there's a lot of challenging angles and edges. Maybe I want to go in and make another grid within that. So I would look at this, and that's at 3, so half of 3 is 1.5. Make a mark, 1.5. Then you'll connect, and then you could do the same thing here. I could cut this measurement in half. This is 2, so half of that would be 1. So 1 and 1, and I could connect. So when you're starting out, one strategy you could use would be to start from the middle. That way, then you're just kind of working out to left and right and top to bottom. You won't feel like if you start from the left and you start moving along with the E and then the A and then the R, and you realize by the time you get to the T, everything's shifted over too far and you don't have enough room, or maybe you've been drawing too small, you have way too much room left. So I'm going to start at the T, and I'm looking right here in the center. I'm going to pick a spot and move out from there. Where the grid lines come into play is that you're going to try and place edges in the same spot in relation to the lines. So I have my horizontal line here, and I'm looking at where the T crosses over. And I'm also comparing that to how far away it is from my vertical line. And from there, I'll make a little dot there to start. You could approach just like connect the dots sort of thing. So then I go to the top of this T, and I'm looking at about how far it is from the vertical and then the horizontal. And see, I'm not really drawing these lines, but I'm lightly tracing them out for me to visually see them. That helps me figure out the placement. So for instance, I want to see the top of this T, about how high up from the vertical line is it? Well, if I take just this length from here to here and divide it into equal segments, to me this looks like 1/3, and then here would be 2/3. So I think that the T is about 1/3 up. 1/3 up the line here, and then I'm looking, so it's probably right about here. And I can jump down to the bottom of the T. Same thing, it looks about, if I draw a line over, it's almost halfway. And from here, not quite halfway, it's a little bit short. Okay, so I said this T is halfway. Good, that looks about right. Then you can connect your lines. Now another sort of helpful technique would be to measure or get the right angle of your lines. So now I'm going to look at the bottom of this T, and it's kind of tricky because it's not straight up and down. You can compare your vertical or horizontal line to the angles here. So I know if I take my pencil and I can line it up against that edge right here, line it up, and then I can shift it down to the bottom. If I'm careful not to move that angle, and quickly draw that in, your eye retains the image of where that pencil was in that angle for a second or two. You can put that line in, and then you've got the angle. Same thing for the top here. Most of the time it's going to be close to parallel, but we've got 1 point perspective playing a role here, so it's not always going to be exact. Now as I move up, I'm looking at where this line is intersecting my vertical. Almost, I'd say it's close to about a quarter. I'm checking here to make sure that's right. It looks close to being where I need it. And then here, draw that through. Now I know you can't see this part of the center part of the T because the cross section is covering it, but I think it's helpful just to draw the whole thing and then erase what you don't need. So it does seem a little bit time consuming, and I am slowing it down a bit for you guys because if you've never really drawn like this, it does take some practice, and the more you practice, the more you don't have to really think as hard. It will just come natural. But if you try to start drawing without using at least some of these tips, you'll soon find that you're not getting your letters accurate to the way the image is, and it's not going to look three-dimensional. That's the tricky part. One more kind of helpful tip here. So looking at curved lines, you guys could use the technique where you take your two pencils and kind of hold them like chopsticks and then draw out your lines like the ribbon letters that we did. So I think for the R here, that would be a nice option for me to try out. So you'd want to line up your pencils. You see this corner here. I'd line up my pencils about that thick, is about the thickness of that R, and I want to make sure I start at the right spot. Again, scanning back and forth between the photograph and this box. I need to scan. All right, so here we go. I wasn't quite too sure of myself for a second. I wanted to make sure the spacing between the R and the T matched up. Now I'm going to make the line here to connect. That should be close to the same angle as what I see here. I need to make this inner edge. And I'm seeing maybe I needed to make this a little bit lower and this curve a little bit sharper. Because I don't have a gap, I can't see the paper, the base of this through the opening of the R. And I think the problem was I didn't space my pencil out enough. But at least that was a starting point. So you can get those curves here and here to be close to the same. Okay, now I'm looking here. Again, you can use that technique of taking your pencil and lining it up and then moving it down. A lot of times for me though, I'm just scanning to make sure things are fitting. Notice this is not quite the right curve. Because I'm comparing the amount of space now. The negative space is equally as important as the positive space that the letters are taking up. Okay, I think that looks better. All right, so making some adjustments. Draw lightly when you're doing this, because you're going to make mistakes. All right, and so we'll finish this out by maybe moving over to the H. I like to work in sections, and it's like a puzzle. You're putting things together. It is better to jump around a little bit. It might seem disorganized, but it really does make more sense, and it will end up saving you time in the end, because like I said, you won't get caught in this trap of drawing too small, and then you draw the next letter smaller because you're comparing it to the first letter that you drew too small and end up with not enough space. So once I get this drawn out, again, similar to what I have here, you do not need to shade, but you could practice with putting a little value in if you wanted. These grid lines would end up being erased, and we'll use this preliminary sketch then to guide you when you do your final drawing of the letters, and then with full shading. All right, guys, thank you and good luck.